Welcome everyone to our statewide community of practice for ACEs and resilience. This is our second season of our webinar series where we go around the state of Washington and have lunch, get a chance to visit with some of the amazing people doing phenomenal work across our state. This is the last webinar of our 2020 season, and we're coming over to Benton Franklin County, just outside of Pasco, and getting to visit with Adan Suarez. This is our most practically rooted webinar that we've done this year. So how does all our work around trauma-informed, equity-informed show up to help us build resilient community, and at the level of housing, and how essential it is to be thinking about our nature of our housing, our nature of our environments as we're working with trauma-informed practices. These practices come down to the neighborhood level, to the community level. So this building of resilient community, there's just so many different aspects to that. And also how to integrate that trauma-informed approach, into all layers of how we're thinking about our life and community. Adan's just been an inspiration in all his work and has been there since 2012. So like a long run in how to this place of building resilient communities. So just a heartfelt welcome to everybody here on the webinar, as well as to our guest today. So thanks for being with us, and look forward to all of the ways that hearing about how housing can support this aspect of resilient community.
Am I on?
You're on.
All right. Hey, well, thank you. What a way to start, right? I really appreciate being here, and I hope I do justice to what how a flourishing community has come about, and using some different tools to be able to really get to creating a resilient community. And so with that, and I've got to mention this, I'm in my corner of my office right now, but my office is, we're going through a lot of changes here, and I'll explain later. So anyhow, hey, well, thank you for having me, and a little bit about myself. I appreciate your introduction, because, a part of, 12 years, since 2012, I've been here. But prior to being here, I was at the local community college, and I've got to say, it was a fabulous 11 years at the community college level. But I realized early on that my head was getting bigger than my heart, and I needed a change. And so I'm here, and I'm going almost on 8 years. So it's been really good, learning definitely a lot about community approach. It's definitely a laboratory of learning. So a little bit about myself. I grew up as a migrant seasonal farm worker, and so I'm very familiar with our area here. I grew up with a close-knit family, and it's been, without my family, and this is my immediate family, I would say that I couldn't do what I do now. And my family has been sort of a way for me to learn too on how to approach them, especially with my oldest, because he went through some trauma early on. And so learning about ACEs and learning about how to become more resilient, I realized that there's ways to approach individuals that have gone through a lot of trauma. And I'm still learning. With that, I wanted to try something. I've done this in other occasions, and I thought, it'd be nice just to do this. And I know we're recording, so one of the things is, if you bear with me, if you go like this, and you've got 3 fingers up, and you got 1, 2, 3, and I ask you to go ahead and put this on your chin, right? But what's happening? You're putting it on your chin, right? I'm asking you to go ahead, these 3 fingers, and you go like this, and you put it on your chin. As you do that, you probably recognize that you weren't hitting your chin, you were actually hitting your cheek. And And so one of the things that I've noticed in life in general, but in working with community, and I've seen this in the public education system, and I've seen this in general community, is that people tend to look at the behavior, right? When a child is acting out, they look at the behavior and they attack the behavior, and they put consequences on the behavior, and they don't look at what the behavior is saying, right? And as I was telling you to put it on your chin, you were just watching what I was doing, put it on your cheek, and it gives me an understanding that we as individuals need to look at what the behavior is communicating and what it's saying to us. And so that's it's, for me, it was a really good illustration of thinking deeper about what people's behavior is communicating. So with it,
Oops, we got you on mute. I'll unmute.
there you go. And are you still?
I can hear you now. Yes, go ahead.
There we go. Sorry.
Let's get your slide back up there.
Yeah.
There we go.
So one of the things that I, so in mentioning this is I recognize that there's still something to be said about how we make people feel, right? And so questions that I ask is, do you make people feel accepted? Do you feel that they truly belong? How about, do you help them, those around you, know their true value? Do you help them pursue their passions, their purpose in life? Wouldn't it be great to be able to answer yes to these? How about, what about if we take the circle a little bit further? What about if it was immediate family members, or friends, or neighbors, or coworkers, strangers, perhaps? We as human beings need to focus a little bit on the well-being of others. I think that's kind of where it starts. If we're thinking about flourishing community, it's about thinking about other individuals. And it's more for us, it has been more about spiritual well-being, right? And so what is spiritual being? Spiritual being, as I perceive it, as we perceive it here, is to be in connection with self. So identifying who we are, connection with others, connection with a higher power. For some of us, it may be God, and connection with our environment, our place, where we live, our surroundings. And so I recognize answering these questions, who am I? Why am I here? What brings meaning to my life? And how does my role connect with those around me, around my life? And those responses and similar questions, and identifying how we can nurture a flourishing community. And I've learned a lot through servant leadership. And I've learned the differences between a leader and a servant leader. And a leader first versus a servant leader are two extreme types. And according to Robert Greenleaf, and I would say that I agree, is the difference manifests itself in the way we take care of others, right? So by the servant first, to make sure that others, people's highest priorities are met. He also says that the best test and the most difficult to administer is, do those around us, do they, while being served, become healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, more likely themselves to serve others? And what is the effect of the least of us, at least of those that are least privileged in society? Will they benefit, or at least will they not further be deprived? So that's sort of a premise to how we approach community. And so I'd like to share some stories with you on what we do. But before I do, and to give you a little perspective of who we are and how we came about, I think it's important to share a little brief founding story to our organizations as a whole. And so, this is Ralph and Cheryl Brochi, and they have a collective of 3 family foundations. And these were all birthed of a visionary call to grow place-based communities. You know, and back in 1968, when they first settled into a small cherry orchard in Benton City, as a teenager, Ralph had dreamed of one day owning an orchard and using its profits to help children in India. Little did he know that the children and the population he was going to be serving more was migrant seasonal farm workers. And so while the work of starting a business was slow, they endured a lot of challenges and tests along the way. And they came around, and other people came around them to help. And so, you know, these 3 foundations hold a trust of legacy of the Brochi Orchards and Vista Hermosa community, which is about 30 miles east of Pasco. And so it's created a learning laboratory for over 50 years, and it's endowed us with teaching and resources to grow a vision of the future. So the 3 foundations is Center for Sharing, which has been renamed Centros. This is a servant leadership development organization, and they focus on teaching and the practice of servant leadership with small organizations, small groups, nonprofits, and for-profits. The Centros is located in, and by the way, the name just changed within the last couple weeks. They are located in the Collegium, and I'll share a little bit where that is at. Then the other foundation that they have, or we have here, is Vista Hermosa Foundation, and its mission is to education and global grant making. And so a lot of their investment is place-based initiatives and serving children in underserved countries around the world. And so you'll see them in the Philippines, and Africa, in India, and Mexico. And so their current focus right now is working on a private school by the name of NILA. It's NILA stands for Nueva Esperanza Leadership Academy. It's a K-8 private school. They also focus on first fruit scholars. And currently now, because they have moved here to Tierra Vida, it is now RISE Scholarship, RISE Scholars. They also work on, some of their activities has been on Brochi family engagement. And so that's been a part of some work that through the family are doing in other places and growing their family to be a family of giving back to community. And lastly, Jubilee Foundation and its mission, and that is the organization I work for, and the one that I will talk most is about Jubilee Foundation and the work we do in Tierra Vida. And so we are a community building organization, and a lot of our funding is investing in infrastructure and nurturing community partnership to build holistic development models. And that's, and so with all 3 organizations, we are rooted in the same principles: to build holistic, flourishing communities through healing, connection to God, self, others, and place. So with that, I wanted to give you sort of a picture. So imagine, and I got to say that this story stuck with me because it reminds me of how Chinese children are always taught to serve others first, right, at the dinner table, by taking food from the communal dishes and placing it in with the elders. And so, which actually gives a sign of respect, which is one of our values, is respect. So typically Chinese people do not think twice about serving others during social eatings and occasions, and sometimes to the abusement of non-Chinese guests. So it's a parable. And so the parable, if I can summarize it, it's you've got an older monk and a younger monk, and the younger monk's like, hey, I'd like to know what the difference is between heaven and hell. And so the older monk's, okay, I can share that with you. And he goes, well, there's no material differences. He replied, or he asked, really, there's no differences? And he goes, not at all, not at all. And so he was a little confused. And so he goes, both heaven and hell look the same. They all have a dining hall with a big pot in the center, which has delicious noodles, and they're boiled and they give off this appetizing scent, right? And so he's like, oh, okay, that's odd. Oh, so each dinner is given a pair of meter-long chopsticks, the older monk said, and they must use them to eat the noodles, right? And one must hold the chopsticks properly without cheating. And so he then goes on and says, well, in the case of hell, people are always starved because no matter how hard they try, they fail to get the noodles into their mouths, right? And in the case of heaven, it's like, well, they can eat and they are fed because people are sitting on the opposite side of them and they're feeding each other. And so the difference is that one is thinking of the other. And that's sort of the picture I have when we think about flourishing community. It's about helping others out. So really our vision, and I won't bore you with reading this, but I think the focus here is, if we're developing and nurturing life-giving communities, we really think about people and their families becoming healthier, wiser, more able to be sufficient, more likely to serve others, especially the most vulnerable amongst them. And so, this is I think about like single mothers moving into a one-bedroom unit. We get oftentimes individuals that are in domestic violence situations, and we recognize that sometimes they need a little help along the way. And so we have housing here. We have multi-housing. I'll get into that a little bit later. But one of the things that happens is that we help them into a unit, help them with services that are oftentimes following up on how they're doing in community, how they're working, if they're still working, and if they're not, how can we get them to get a job and so forth, right? Because we're not giving the rent for free, but we recognize that they might not be paying full rent right off the bat. And so we see community at times, and we've recently actually seen this, where a single mother had lost her job and she couldn't pay full rent. And so, make a long story short, individuals helped out, joined to help this individual get back on their feet. And so we recognize that we walk alongside with community members to get them to a different place and a stronger place. So that's part of working with the vulnerable in the community. And so when we think about our mission, is developing communities that welcome all, evoke individuals' gifts to serve the common good, and nurture spiritual well-being. And so Jubilee Foundation is a holistic community development organization. And so we are a people-centered, place-based organization. And right now, we're placed in Tierra Vida. And we'll talk a little bit about what we will be doing in the future. So we recognize that when people feel safe where they're at, they have a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose in their life. A shared desire to help other people begins to develop within them. So through collaboration and dialogue, we seek to find an alternative to the isolation and unhealthy attributes that come with trauma. And so we really work with individuals at a holding hand level a lot of the times. So now that I've talked a little bit about, how our vision and mission, I think it's important to recognize what happens to trees that are planted by a stream of water. And I like the picture here because it, for one,
You want to step forward into the picture right now? I just see your.
The Brochi family has had an apple orchard, right? And so when we think about nature, we think about life-giving, and so what orchards do. And in this case, I asked the question, well, what happens to a tree when it's planted near a stream of water? Well, we recognize that the tree becomes a tree that is very flourishing, right? It's not worried about drought. It's not worried about that it's going to lose its life because it doesn't have any water or nutrients. And so, I think about what happens when it doesn't have the nutrients. There is drought. So same with residents, right? Same with individuals living in a community. If they live in poverty, discrimination, community disruptions, lack of opportunity, economic mobility, social capital, housing quality, right? And affordability. And if they live in violence. So we begin to see branches within that tree with a lack of fruit. Perhaps some of that, those branches begin to look like maternal depression, emotional and sexual abuse, substance abuse, domestic violence, incarceration, mental illness. The list goes on, right? Emotional neglect, physical neglect. Most of us, and most of this, I should say, has to do with adverse childhood experiences. And so we recognize that trauma exists within community. And so these experiences are because the lack of nutrients in their environment. And so we have a learning laboratory here. We have a community that we can help nourish. And I'll share a little bit about how we do that. And remember the Chinese proverb story, feeding each other. This is what flourishing community looks like. So it reminds me of a story of Gustavo. He's our maintenance staff. And a few years ago, he found some sprinklers, flowers, and hoses that were all pulled right out of the apartment landscaping. And he recognized, he caught on that it was a little kid named Christian. And because he's been, how should I say, Gustavo's been trained on trauma informed and has understood what community needs in order to grow. He rather than like going to the parents and being mad, he did go to the parents to let them know what was going on, but he ended up taking that child under his wings and saying, you know what, let me teach you how to help, right? And so he actually helped them. He actually taught him how to fix sprinklers, how to pull weeds. And so at times we've seen little Christian out there working around his apartment unit, helping nurture the environment. And how cool is that? So I think it becomes very, very cool to see those things happen within community. So management philosophy, and so in all that we do, we have 3 core philosophies that shape our approach. This is with staff and community members. And so we really work on servant leadership as part of our philosophy. And I think it goes with the idea of what Robert Greenleaf stated, right? He says, if a better society is to be built, one that is more just and more loving, one that provides greater creative opportunities for its people, then the most open course to raise both the capacity to serve and the very performance of existing institutions. He says, in advancing the sentiment, and I think we recognize that, is we ask ourselves the essential test questions, right? You know, do those that we serve, are they becoming healthier, wiser, more freer, more autonomous, more likely themselves to become servants? So that's part of servant leadership. Empowered worldview, and we recognize that developing from within and reducing dependence on outside charity is crucial in building the capacity of individuals and a flourishing community. You know, a few years ago, we were running an after school program, and we recognized there was an outside partner that said, hey, we want to help with reading, and we would like to incentivize that help. And so they quickly said, hey, we'll provide iPods for these kids, right? As long as they participate. Well, what do you think is going to happen the following year? I mean, the kids came back and they're like, hey, are we going to get iPods? And it's like, it grew on them an expectation that they were going to receive iPods because that's what they did the prior year. So we recognize that, you know, and you know, Robert Lupton talks about this in his book, Toxic Charity. He says, you give once, you elicit appreciation. You give twice, and you create anticipation. You give 3 times, and you create expectation. You give 4 times, and it becomes entitlement. You give 5 times, and you establish dependency. And we recognize that in how we approach things, we want to make sure that we're not doing things in a toxic way. And so Dietrich Bonhoeffer said this: any community who allows unemployed people to remain within it will eventually perish because of them. When individuals are not able to contribute their God-given gifts, they suffer spiritual disconnection, resulting in a loss of meaning and purpose, or a sense of belonging. And so we recognize that we don't want to grow dependency. We want to empower individuals within the community to take on things that they feel passionate about. And so we'll talk a little bit about, you know, I think I mentioned already, identifying gifts and how to bring those gifts to agency, and what is the need in the community. And lastly, part of our philosophy is trauma-informed care. And so we can never be too aware of everything that impacts individuals and why people behave the way they do. But we recognize that we can understand our own traumas and the traumas that certain people bring along their way, and actually approach them with the thought that, hey, they probably need to feel safe in order to learn. And so we recognize that safety is very important, and we recognize, you know, when they become safe, they begin to feel the love as well from individuals in the community. So some more of our efforts that we've done, and this is the community of Tierra Vida, so we have a community of 236 single family homes, and we have a total of 252 that we will finish. And so we've had 16 lots that have been on hold, and I'll talk a little bit about those here shortly. But part of our efforts have been, you know, developing community from the ground up. And so, you know, many people would say, well, isn't that property development? Well, for sure, it's property development, and that's part of our work. But the true work is really working with the people that are in the community to help the community become a flourishing community. We also have 129 multifamily units. And so, right, can you see my mouse?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
So the actual multifamily is all on the front right here. Our office space is within this building. You can't probably see it because of the address, but this is all phase 1 of the multifamily, and this is all phase 2 of multifamily. When we think about the single family homes, it's anything beyond here. Oh, that surrounds all right here. And so, and then we have a 5-acre parcel park right here that was gifted to the city. And so this is that park that's right here. This is what was developed, and we have a community garden within it. And that was, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well, but that was something that the community desired and wanted, and made efforts to get funding for that, as well as the soccer field. So part of our efforts have been community development. And lastly, a lot of our efforts goes into fiscal stewardship and programmatic investment. And I would say that naturally, as a family foundation, we still have to invest. There's donations that happen, but we have a lot of our work is working with community. And so anything that's really coming out of the P&L and the profits that we have, it goes back to community. We have outreach that goes on within community. We have a department that's called Community Impact that actually is dealing with working with people and engaging them and having community get to know each other at a deeper level. Then we have multifamily department and a rec center department and so forth. And so a lot of the community impact and the rec center is really part of the efforts that go back to an outreach, I would say, back to community. So it's part of our philanthropic work. So the four strategies to our core approach have really been honoring diversity. We recognize that every year we have, I should say that we have quite a bit of Latino population here. We have if you were to look at multifamily and seasonal family homes, we have above 90% Latinos living in the community. We have also about, I would say, close to a 20% Anglo population. We have some African American, some Burmese families living here, and as well as some families from like Pakistan and India. And so when we think about honoring diversity, we have exposure to new cultures, and so we have events that happen throughout the year that honors that. We have also engagement. Everyone should be known and loved, and so that's part of the interaction, and that happens through community events as well. But we have staff who walk alongside individuals, and especially those that are high risk. And so part of our outreach staff, they tend to connect individuals back to services in the larger community. I mentioned the community garden earlier, and so when we think about nurturing a spirit of care, it's a small tidbit or a small piece of what the larger picture looks like. But the community garden really, we see a lot of, obviously not only with nature itself and producing plants, but there's a lot of exchange of produce that happens within the garden. And so it ties in with the larger picture of nurturing care, a spirit of care within the community. And one of the other things that we have, excuse me, that we have to our core approach has been third places. And we recognize that this term is conceptually something by a sociologist, Ray Oldenburg, that speaks to the importance of alternative spaces. Our first space is home, correct? Our second place is work, but our third spaces become other places that we tend to meet: coffee shops, rec centers, parks, etc. And so there's an importance here of what actually goes on in these third spaces. And so we recognize, like in the rec center and even in the cafe, we tend to have a lot of people drop by, and sometimes they just want to talk. And a lot of those become some of the younger age children that are looking for mentors in their life. And so sometimes we're connecting them with the resources in the larger area. And so I wanted to mention what Ray Oldenburg says. He says, what suburbia cries for are the means for people to gather easily, inexpensively, regularly, and pleasurably. a place on the corner, real life alternatives to television, easy escapes from the cabin fever of marriage and family life that do not necessitate getting into an automobile. And so we recognize that having the cafe and having the rec center at the front of the community has really been an area where community gather, and that's where a lot of connection happens within the community. So I want to bring you to the theory of change. And so a lot of organizations tend to focus on the branches and the fruit, right? And so what we see in the branches and the fruit, we look at indicators, and these indicators are like healthy lifestyles. So we think about, wow, are people, what's going on that's producing that health, and what can we do to honor that and help that grow? So community group life, people gathering for a similar purpose. We have, and I'll speak to this in a few slides ahead, but we talk about community life in a way that is life-giving to individuals, right? We also have the garden. It's a healthy lifestyle. It's a walkability. Sports happen, rec center facilities. So a lot of things we start monitoring, and these become our indicators, right, of health of a well-being community. Sufficient economies is another thing that we track, and so we think about like rent discount programs or mixed income, the property values within the HOA. Early on, we found that because we were on the east side of Pasco, it was very difficult to get the values to increase. But we had a staff member who went to bat and actually got assessors out here on a regular basis, and we've seen our community actually be very comparable to the west side of Pasco. And so we see values increasing. So we recognize that goes along with helping people in income, right? They can sell their house and becomes something more that they're able to gain, right? Because of their value of the home. And so we have an HOA that protects their values and so forth. Engaged citizens. I think I mentioned we have a homeowner association. We have community-led events that happen within the community. So those are things that we're tracking to see how well community is engaged with each other. And then we track life-enhancing education. We have grown to have partners within the community for after-school programming. We currently, for the last 4 years, have partnered with Century 21, and on an annual basis, we're serving more than 100 students through that program. And then we also have a summer program and so forth. And so I mention this because a lot of programs tend to focus there. That's not where our work is at. Our work really becomes working in the roots. How are we nurturing a connection with a higher power, right? So it is through the way we approach individuals, and we're not preaching to them. That's not our really for us to do. We actually go at it differently, and it's sometimes through connection through the groups that are created within the community. So we see relationships growing, and that's part of the others. Self. So we identify, do people have gifts, and how can we connect those gifts to a higher purpose or a need in the community? I'll share some stories in a little bit. And then we have place. Are they nurturing a place that they live in? And so I'd like to tell a story of a child. Early on, he saw an adult working on his car at the apartments, and he seen the adult actually drinking a beer, and two kids actually go up to him. He's like, "Sir, you're not supposed to be drinking alcohol here." And I think about, like, where did that come from? Why is that child actually confronting an adult about not drinking alcohol in public? And I recognize that it was taught somewhere. And so along the way, we start seeing some of these glimpses of community actually honoring their community. So why is it important to do root work, right? Well, with the theory of change, I'd say that one of the things that I've noticed early on, and here's Iskader, but before Iskader, I wanted to mention the taking care of others. There was a time when a tenant named by the name of Margarita saw another tenant who was next door neighbor who was actually ill from she had diabetes and she was suffering. She couldn't really walk that much anymore, and so we saw constantly that Margarita would come over and deliver food. Now they're not related at all, but we recognized Margarita had a heart for those that needed help, and she's done that over and over again, not just with Norma but other individuals. Iskader here, she moved from Texas. She moved here on a domestic violence program. She came here with really nothing. She had her 3 children. That was it. She found that this community gave her hope, gave her a place where she could actually grow. And so, you know, and granted, she was an individual who we took in. She didn't have funds to begin with to pay rent, but she came on a program. And when she came on board and lived here for the first few months, she was struggling. And what we noticed is that we would work with her quite often, and we would follow up with her. And it came to a point where she began to connect with other individuals in the community, where they started actually helping her pay rent by selling what's called nopalitos, right? Cactuses. We saw at times that they were selling like little ice cream helados, you know, and even at times we saw that they were selling what was, boy, I'm spacing it right now. Another food delicacy here in the community, tamales, and she was able to receive that from individuals, and we recognized that that's exactly what flourishing looks like, right? And so the root work about connecting with others, about understanding what values I bring, becomes very important. Here's Erica Garcia and her mom. I bring this up because, you know, it took one conversation. Here's a guy named Dick who said, I am retired, I'm from PNL, and I used to work out at Hanford, but I feel like I want to give back, and is there something that I can do? And, you know, he had a conversation. Cheryl connected, I think, or Glenn connected Dick with Maria, and it was about at the time when Maria was like, Erica was working with robotics, and she said, I love robotics. So Dick took it upon himself, like began to have regular conversations with her and began to nurture her in a way that, like, hey, I think you can do these things. You should think about higher ed. Well, I've got to say that now she is a graduate from Washington State University and is working in the Columbia Basin and now drives a big red truck, company truck. She ended up with a degree from, I believe she ended up with an environmental and earth sciences with a minor in horticultural, geology, and biology. And so you think, you know, that could be anyone. You're right, that could be anyone. But the fact of the matter is it took someone to want to give back. And so Dick was thinking about someone else. He wasn't thinking about himself. So it makes me think about the root work about getting to know individuals and other people. This is what we tagline CGL or Community Group Life. These are just some pictures of what has transpired over the years. We have, and so the way we see this is that it's a recipe for people to get to know each other at a deeper level. So we have kids that are playing sports and they're getting coached by individuals and parents in the community. We've got what was started as just a little girls club became a Wonder Woman club that, after the movie Wonder Woman came out, this is Olivia, and she's like, she took the girls out to go see Wonder Woman, and after the movie, they're like, you know what, we need to change our name to Wonder Woman Club. And so you'd see these girls flourishing because they had someone that they could connect with, and actually have done some projects within the community. We have others that are giving back by coaching. We have this group over here. This was a little preschool group that we had a lot of mothers in the community or families that were young but didn't have school-age kids, and they're like, we'd love to get together. And so one mother, it was born in her to do this, and she ended up connecting with the school district, and then the school district actually gave them some supplies. Anyways, and the list goes on. I mean, we have several ways that people have connected, and I realized that in 2019 we had I want to say about 19 groups. From the year before, I think it was 5 less the year before, but they have come around helping each other by learning together. So part of I think I want to lead into investment, because I think a lot of you probably are thinking about this. And so, when we invested, what we were thinking is, how do we make cash flow and give back to the community? And it's not for us to be thinking about high-end profits. So a normal developer would be out looking at anywhere from 15 to 25% of return investments. That's not what we were looking for. We were looking long-term investment, and that's really about creating flourishing community. So then the multifamily became an investment that was about $12.5 million, and that was inclusive of a rec center. And the rec center is really a place where a community gathers, but we have a fitness center that people can contribute to become a member. And so there is some of that revenue that comes through because they wanted to be a part of that. And through the multifamily, again, the investment was to create a place where we were going to have cash flow, but the expectation was really a 0% ROI, just mainly to pay off the principal with the hope of returning to some seed additional housing. And so what we've seen is that year after year, we've had anywhere from 2 to 3% of revenue. Our rent covers all expenses of operation, inclusive of all programming positions and activities. And rental rates are maintained at a level of affordability, really, to those at 50% AMI here in the Franklin County place. And so I would say that, again, we weren't looking at making a lot of return. We were wanting to just cash flow. So if I were to show you what rent looks like, we have standard rent of a 3-bedroom unit at $975, and it goes down all the way to $682 to a 1-bedroom unit. Now, those were standard rates for phase 1. And phase 2, this came, we finished phase 2 in 2018, and the rent was a little bit higher because we had some different square footage and upgrades that we had. But you would see that it's similar. There isn't that much difference, maybe $75 difference from the two. And so we're not a Section 8 organization. We don't take Section 8. We are privately funded. Rental rates are maintained at affordability. We're currently looking at other models. One model that we're thinking of is we're looking at a graduated rent model. And so that would look like something like, if I lived in the 20% poverty rate, my rent would be X amount. But if I lived at the 80%, my rent would be this amount. And so we're looking at how to live in fully into our mission. And so those are some things that we're looking at for next year.
And so this year, has that been just kind of some discounts and all on rent?
So good question. One of the things that I didn't mention is that we have a helping hand pot of money that we budget every year. And it's actually, I'd like to specify that we started back in 2012 with the apartment units, and we incentivized with $100 discount from those that were low income right off the bat. But the catcher was that they needed to give 2 hours of their time back to community. Mm-hmm. So over the years, we actually decreased that amount and totally went away with it, because it was the carrot that was dangling in front of everyone, and it became sort of an entitlement rather than I want to do this out of service. So we incentivized essentially. So with the helping hand pot is that we will, I think we have about a certain amount of money that we've allocated to, if a tenant can't pay, let's go ahead and help them with this amount of rent. And so we do that constantly. We're looking at right now with COVID-19, there's some individuals that haven't been able to pay rent. We're not kicking them out, but we recognize that we need to work with them. And so right now we've got staff that are working on getting other organizations to be able to help them out. And so the Salvation Army has been one of them that has been contributing to their need. Others, we've got tenants that are raising money on their own. And so I talked a little bit about rent and talked a little bit about our strategies and so forth. And so part of the work that we've done in the last year has been on a story project. And this happened last year, and I shared it at the conference last year, the Paper Tigers conference. And I just wanted to mention, this is sort of a story capture strategy. So what we did is that we came out with, and this was adopted by Opportunity International. Sorry, we adopted it from them. And what we asked, the questions were really in relation to community, environment, family, God, and self. So some of the questions, for example, was, have you in the last year helped or disrupted your community? When we think about others, have you helped or disrupted your community in the past year for better or for worse? And so they would answer that question, right? And now they were telling stories about those questions, if that makes sense. And so these end up being the scores that we got. And so we noticed that context was negative. What they internalized in their feelings were actually positive. And what became even more positive was their actions. And I'll just share with you that the thinking behind this is sort of giving us a baseline on how people, what really the story of Tierra Vida is as a collective. And these were 34 interviews that happened in a matter of a month and a half. And we randomly picked them. I think it was close to about 17, 18 tenants, and the remainder were single family home property owners. And some of the stories that came out were like, there was a shooting, a husband shot his wife, and then he realized that he thought he killed her, so he committed suicide, right? And the wife survived. But we think about that and we say, man, that's a negative context, right? But what we saw was some of the things that happened within community that gathered community. And this was all initiated by community members. And they brought a lot of the community together to talk about what happened, how to see this ahead of time. Like, could we have seen signs of this happening? And so their actions, were very positive. And so that's just one glimpse or one story that I could share, but I think it's important to recognize that what we are internalizing here is the fact that, or interpreting, I should say, is this is a resilient community, right? Their context is negative, but yet what they felt was positive, and even more positive was their actions on how they did things. So that's what came out of here. The pictures down below were just sort of comments that actually aligned with, you know, engaged citizens. We talked about like life enhancing education, sufficient economies, healthy lifestyles, you know, connection with others, and so forth. And what we noticed is that there wasn't a lot of talk around life enhancing education. So we know that that's some work that we have to do along the way.
I love with that you're measuring like what you want to create. Like these are the values. And so you're finding ways to people tell those stories and then also see those actions. And so fostering what you want to create.
Right, right. So the things we're learning is that, you know, we really feel like everyone has a gift to share. You know, John down here, he suffers from mental illness. He's a homeowner. He actually had a nervous breakdown back in 2015. Almost, I would say, simultaneously, or maybe it was a few weeks afterwards, when Brad Jensen in West Pasco came out of his house and was shot by police officers. And I'm not by any means saying anything negative against the police, but what I am saying is that, you know, Brad Jensen, perhaps if homeowners knew who he was, he could have probably been saved, right? He could have probably been de-escalated at the time that he came out of his house. John Fire, in this instance, we saw that there was he came out with some, I think a BB gun and some, he was very belligerent and was yelling in front of his yard. And so some neighbors got a little, scared, and they recognized that, hey, this is not right, but they called other neighbors. And so other neighbors came by, and what they saw in John is that he was having an episode. And so they de-escalated him, and police officers showed up. So imagine if he wouldn't have been de-escalated, he could have probably ended up just as where Brad Jensen was shot and killed. And so, I see that as he's an individual who now is giving back to the community because he saw some kids breaking his own sprinklers when they would walk by. And he realized, you know what, we need to do something, but I don't know them. And so we got the community, the neighbors together with him, and he realized, man, these kids don't have bikes. That's the reason they're bored, right? They're breaking my sprinklers. And so it was born in him to actually have a bike ministry. And so he gets donations from the police department and other organizations where they're bringing bikes, and he's actually asking kids to work on them before they actually get to obtain one. So that's just one story. I realize that stories matter, and I can probably share that Irene here was suffering from as well as mental illness, and we had her Maria actually understand that, and so she started helping her and actually walking with her through her mental illness and her nervous breakdowns. And so I think about like communities actually caring for others. They're not thinking about themselves first. I recognize that community meetings are needed, and you see this as a gathering that we do, which was meeting monthly, but now it's quarterly, or has been quarterly until, and we're still meeting, but the difference is that it's now on Zoom versus in person. But this is a place where people come to inform others and be informed of what's going on in the community. And so we see that as a social structure, and there's rhythm that is happening, right? They get used to how frequent these meetings are. Incentives are toxic, and I think that's something we've learned along the way. A few years ago, we had an opportunity we got a call from a local organization who fundraises during Christmas, and they called us and said, hey, I think this was actually probably in 2013. And they're like, we have a warehouse full of toys. Your community can use this. And we're like, oh, really? Our community can use this. And it was at the time when the apartments were being built, and we recognized that it's kind of toxic to actually grab some toys and just go donate them to the community, right? Especially when we're kind of robbing the dignity from the parents. And so we decided, how about we incentivize? How about, hey, this is an opportunity. You don't have to spend money. There's some toys here that you can get. All we ask is that you donate an hour of your time back to the community. And so we had community members actually cleaning and doing different things around the community that helped them say, I did something to be able to get this. And so that's something we did. And so, and then we recognize that walking with residents is extremely important. I mean, I can't say that enough. And I would say that contributes 100% to the flourishing of communities, because they feel the love. And it's what contributes to the resiliency more than anything. So the things we're seeing is that, you know, engaged citizens, more residents are participating and leading events. You know, this weekend we have residents that wanted to do a parade for graduates. And so there's residents that said, okay, they planned it out and they're going to meet here at 6 o'clock, and at 7 o'clock this Saturday, they're going to parade around the community to celebrate the graduates from this community. You know, healthy lifestyles, we recognize that we track the police calls that come out of this community, and we've seen a decrease in the amount of police calls that come out from this community. We're seeing that life enhancing education is still something that people desire, and it's not just through after school program and summer program, although we track that. We recognize that there's other ways to do that, and that's a part that we want to increase is, you know, how are people ready for jobs, for example? Are we building vocational life skills? Are people on a meaningful path, educational path? Are they adequately prepared and equipped to walk the path? So those are questions we're always asking. And, you know, we're seeing that that residents are becoming more and more stable. We're using, I would say this year, even though with COVID, I don't think we saw as much as last year and the year before with Helping Hand. So we're seeing that people are manning up to their how do I say, their responsibilities. And so they recognize, and we recognize that there's some giving of them that's happening. Partners that we've had along the way, and I want to preface this with the fact that we've had a lot more partners in this, but I think it's important to recognize that we've had 13 builders throughout the community, one of which was Habitat for Humanity. Out of the 236 single family homes, they built 26 homes here. And we recognize as a developer that, you know, we could have had the whole community filled with Habitat for Humanity homes, but we recognize that mixed incomes is probably a better approach than fully putting Habitat homes on one corner of the community. We've seen this in South Atlanta with our partners in Focus Community Services in South Atlanta. And one of the things that they noticed, and what they're doing is working with gentrified community. And partly they saw that Habitat homes were right next to each other in one corner of the community. And sure enough, it became very gentrified. So what they're doing is that they're rebuilding some of that Habitat homes, and they're actually bringing in mixed income families that are mixed well within the community and they're seeing a lot more flourishing. And so we recognize that, you know, that's one of the main reasons that we did not go fully with Habitat for Humanity. We've had partners for the community garden, WC Tri-City Master Gardeners Program, Pasco Lowe's, Heroes Project, Rotary. I mean, we've had grants that were written and funded by some of these individuals, as well as contributing every year. The Master Gardeners Program comes in and actually works with the community. And just as an FYI, we have the largest community garden in the Tri-Cities. And it's currently serving close to 40 families in our community. Soccer field, I would say that one of the things is it was funded by Rotary Club. And the interesting thing here is Nito, his name is Nito Lucatero, or Jose Lucatero. And he is and was back then very passionate about soccer. And he's like, can you guys put a soccer field? And we're like, well, we're donating the land. I go, but are you really interested in the soccer field? He goes, yes. I said, okay, well, can you share what you want to see in that? And would you be willing to write something up and see if we can submit it to the Rotary Club? And sure enough, he did. And he got it funded. And on top of that, I mean, he had community like organized to be able to come and help put the lines together and put the soccer, the goals and so forth. And so it's been pretty cool to see community come together because of that. And along the way, we've had other partners for programming. And when I say programming, I'm talking about after school programming, summer program. I'm also talking about just programming that deals with events in the community. You know, if I were to say, the biggest thing is we want community to own and lead events, and we're getting to that point where they're leading almost every event in the community. So here's what we're working on now. People's stories. We're going to be soon breaking ground on a new building, and this is what it looks like. It's a $4 million building, and I mentioned to you earlier that we are, you know, part of my move in this office has been because we've been all like sardines in 3 foundations in one building. And so now this is partly the reason that this building is going to be created, is because we're going to have staff move into that. We also have, so partly, I think I mentioned that we have 16 lots that will be developed. We've got, we haven't started on that. It's already at the city's level, but the fact of the matter is that COVID's around, and so they haven't given us the green light. But we've already got a waiting list for those 16 lots, and people want to move in. Lastly, I think when I think about the community strategizing, I think about like really working on with the leadership within the community. And so we're constantly working with those that have been contributing back, even through the homeowners association. And so, but more so when I think about strategizing for new community, and I think about what we're going to endeavor in, I'm excited because we've got an opportunity to develop virgin ground, several hundred acres. And so that's pending. But on top of that, we're looking at going and partnering with several organizations, one being the City of Pasco, the Boys and Girls Club, and as well as the school district and others, to be able to identify pockets within the greater Pasco community and see what needs to help with gentrified locations. And we're looking at like 16 block radius of some sort, and to be able to, and we're probably going to start with a story capture of some sort to understand what that block looks like and what their story is, and see the needs that we can help in that community. And so not only revamping or rebuilding old structures, but it could be putting in some new structures as well.
So I love it. So like transitioning to like, how do you take all you've learned here and then move it to the level of a neighborhood in an
Right,
existing community, and how to bring community health in at the level of the neighborhood.
right. Teresa, I know that I'm probably at my limit for time. One of the things that I didn't, I've got a video that I could share, but I think it's probably best if I explain sort of what we're doing with that. And it's because of COVID, we recognize that we're trying to tell the story of community, but we also want people to be connected within the community. So when I think about telling people's story, we've done, we're working on, and we've been doing already since April, like 3 different types of videos. And we've got videos that are going out that are just updates. Hey, this is what's going on. Be on the lookout for this, and so forth, right? That happens on a weekly basis. We're also doing spotlights, and these spotlights are shining the light on individuals within the community, so the greater community sees who he is or she is and is able to connect with them. And lastly, and it's pretty new, we just did our very first fatherhood video that just came out right before Father's Day. And it was within the community to be telling what fatherhood meant to them, right? So we kind of put it as a theme, but it also puts their perspective, right, of what father means to them. And it introduces who they are to the greater community so that there's interaction within them. And so we're looking at going deeper with stories, because we really feel like people connect through the stories that people have. And so, so yeah, I feel like that's sort of where we're going. And I'm looking forward to really working on a project that's going to be maybe on a quarterly basis, where community gets together and talks about storytelling. And maybe we might do a theme of some sort. So be on the lookout for that. Well, with that said, I just feel like there's going to be tons of questions, and I hope that I can get those emails, and maybe perhaps I can respond to anything that people may have regarding what we're doing, and maybe I can go deeper on some of the topics that I touched on.
Yes. And there may be some real interest also in the neighborhood work you're doing, so that people can reach out to you that direction too. And
for sure, and you can reach out to this email. I would say that our website has all 3 foundations, so you can click on that website and it'll take you to all 3 foundations. And the one that's developing Tierra Vida is specifically Jubilee Foundation. And if you wanted to follow us on Facebook, that's our Facebook address. So.
And I bet we can get some of those videos there. That'd be awesome.
That's right, for sure.
Well, thank you so much. It's just so great to be here, and just like all this imagination for how to, create and support healthy communities, and I think bringing in the new housing models. So I look forward to also just like all the ways you're working with your different scales for how you're doing rent and your helping hands pool, and the level of reciprocity that supports a flourishing community.
Yeah, I would say one thing I didn't mention with the development of virgin ground is we're looking at what does the different pockets of housing, we've got single family homes and we've got multifamily homes. Well, what if we had duplexes, or what if we had communal living spaces? And so we're looking at those to be able to develop this new community. And so it's just something that we're thinking about. And
I know that there's some
we learn from.
And there's some thinking going on over in Olympia too, like how do you develop housing across the wage spectrum?
Right.
So really exciting to look in all these different models for, supporting, families as they flourish, as they move into healthy places.
Right. Well, thank you very much. I hope I did the service here, and I was able to at least give a glimpse of what flourishing may look like. So thank you within community.
Yeah. And thank you Adana, it's just great to have you here and being part of our statewide community of practice for ACEs and resilience. All right, everyone, will have a great day, and we'll be sharing out all of the resources here too, and a write-up from our talk today. Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye. There you go. Oops, I lost you. Stop recording.